Hmm. Great morning, friends. Great morning, world. This is your boy, Dr. JC Doornick, a little bit cleaned up today, a little bit of a different hairstyle going on. But I want to welcome you to another edition of the Make Sense with Dr. JC Doornick podcast, specifically the live edition, which won't sound that way when it goes to podcast, but we call it Make Sense Mondays. And every Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern, for a host of reasons, we come live and we stream to places like Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and who knows where, right? I mean, we live in a world where people are, potentially looking at us through our cameras. We don't even know. So in any case, today is a very, very interesting podcast episode that we are calling, what are we calling this episode today? Infinite potential. And we're going to look at this idea of making sense of whether or not we do in fact have an infinite potential. And I'm going to attempt to uncover something that you may not have observed, something that you will very, very much understand exists, but something that you just may not have observed on your own. And once this comes into your field of vision and awareness, you will realize that you have infinite potential. So I'm very, very excited about that. So I'm going to jump right into it today. But what I want to start off by saying is I'm going to introduce a new concept to you. For those of you that watch live, this might not be in the podcast version because we cleaned it up and make a shorter edition for the podcast version. But I also like to ramble a little bit here and just talk about things that are going on right here in the moment. I don't know if you notice this, but so I typically wear some sort of a t-shirt and a hat, but today I'm not wearing a hat. And also what I've done, which is extremely uncomfortable, which is what I like about it, is that I've parted my hair. Like, what has happened to the hair part, right? So I've actually brushed my hair today. Usually I'll just try to make it look cool and push it back, but I often wear a hat. Where's your hat? Great morning, Lori. So not only am I not wearing a hat, but I've parted my hair. So I want to explain why. So this message, I'm going to do a live today on my Facebook and maybe LinkedIn and talk about something that I call date mourning. So you very often hear about this concept, married couples or involved couples that have kids, or even couples that are in love that want to spend more time with one another, but life gets crazy, as you know. So if you can relate to that, then let me know, because we're live right now. And like I said, this is most likely not going to come out in the podcast version. So date mourning is something that my wife and I created, which allows us to step outside of the norm, right? Outside of the things that we have learned from our mother, father, teacher, preacher, but also society, which would be something like date night, which says, hey, you got to try to plan a night for, you and your wife to stop, or you and your partner to stop being ships passing in the night. But you know what? I don't know about you. That doesn't always work out. Life can get pretty insane. And we always try to make sure that we look at life and make sure that the insanity is not being depicted by things that don't matter. But even when you do live your life around the things that matter most, meaning only allow the people and things that deserve your attention to get your attention, even when you're living like that, it doesn't always work out, does it? Right? There's certain weeks where it doesn't work out. And I happen to, for one, I'm madly in love with my wife. I don't ever want to be without my wife. I very often people tell me, oh, you need your own time. I get it. I understand. But in my reality, I don't need my own time. I'd much, much rather enjoy my life, where I enjoy my life much, much more when my wife is around. So that being said, I don't like missing date night. So we came up with this idea called date morning, which is happening this morning. So you can't see it because we're on Zoom, but I'm actually wearing this shirt. I've got a nice belt on. I've tucked my shirt into my pants. How many of you are dressing like that work from home? I mean, we just wing it. Sometimes I'm not even wearing pants when I do these things. I've got some shoes on. I've cleaned up. I shaved and everything like that. I will wear my no lens glasses because that's kind of my thing. But we're going to go out and have a coffee date. And we've set it up where we've got somebody to watch the dog. We've dropped the daughter off and everything like that. So I just wanted to introduce that idea. If you are struggling with date night, then have date lunch or date afternoon or date morning. There's always a way. Where there's a will, there's a way, right? So let's get into infinite potential. This one's going to be a little bit heavy, but when you look at reality and your potential, it is heavy. And all I'll say about that is that the reason why it's heavy is because most everything that is actually happening in the world, even though you might know of it, for the most part, you have learned so many different skills. You're like a black belt in the skill of making sure you don't take note of things, right? Because if we took note of everything, then we would have that ultimate overwhelm thing. And, it's only a certain group of people, and I'll give a shout out to the people in the amazing members that are growing in the Make Sense Academy that allow themselves to be open, curious, and just entertain ideas. But if you look at reality, right, there's a lot of components in reality that we're unaware of. We might know of, but we just don't pay attention. They don't get our time and attention. So what I want to share with you is if you can come along with me on this journey right now, we're going to be done in 23 minutes. On this topic of infinite potential, you're going to discover something that will in fact overwhelm you, but the overwhelm will be one of a positive nature, because it will be overwhelming how much potential you have, how much potential we have. Are you with me with my parted hair? Okay, we're going to make sense of that. Cologne, she asked if I'm wearing cologne. Listen, you want to know the truth about cologne? I have this beautiful cologne that I wear, and it's only one you can get from France, and I won't wear any other one. It's called Jiki. And my son came to visit recently. He took a spray of it, liked it, and he says, I'm taking this. And I said, of course. So I'm in a holding pattern to get my cologne right now. So I'm not wearing cologne right now, but in general, I smell good. Good question, Lori. So let's get into this. Infinite potential always begins with the same sound and word, which as a reminder means I haven't made my mind up yet. That's how I enter thoughts. Things that make me go, are things that I'm thinking about that I haven't made up my mind about yet. HMMM. So have you ever stepped back? Here's the question. To make the observation that reality, this thing that you call reality, keyword real, because you're saying reality is real, only exists in the presence of the observer. Have you ever recognized that reality doesn't even exist without somebody observing it? And, another way of saying that, without somebody or something making an observation of something, right, that you call reality, hypothetically, it doesn't exist. Now, that would be an exercise right now to see the degree to which you're open to things, right? If you say, oh, that's nonsense, I know it exists, then you've made up your mind about something that you learned. So that was my little exercise, like a little stretch for this conversation, right? Can you identify right now that without observing something, does it exist? You look up at night and you see the moon, like Donald Hoffman shares in A Case Against Reality, and you go, that's the moon. And I say, turn around and look the other way and prove to me that the moon is still there. Just like in a video game, right? You don't render scenery in the background of a video game until you turn your character there. So add to that the complex interplay of human perception, We always say perception is subjective. It's an acquired taste, right? And that means between our sensory systems and the plethora of persuasions and influences that we've received through our whole life since the day we came out and we had no idea of anything, right? But then our programmers, and they all meant well, our mother, father, teacher, preacher, and then society, what we consume every day, including the evolutionary paying forward from our forefathers, right? Our understanding of reality, and this is another stretch, our understanding of reality is not a direct reflection of the external world, but is shaped by all of those factors. So what that means is when you look at something, there's a lot of people and things in your experience that have shaped the way it looks. Can you dig that? Because if you can, you're going to have a lot of fun with this idea of potential. Some people naturally understand this stuff. So all of that stuff that I referred to, it leads to what we call a subjective experience that only partially captures the full spectrum of existence. Make sense? Okay. So let's talk about that, the subjectivity of perception. So that means that our perception of things, this is a very, very important concept. If you're already in this state right now where you're saying, I don't know if I can handle this, I just want you to give yourself the opportunity to recognize the reason why you're looking and thinking that way is because it's too much for you to entertain that this narrative that you've been playing out your whole life might actually have been made up. But if you can entertain that, you're about to have a lot of fun. So the subjectivity of perception. So remind yourself of this. From birth, individuals are molded by their environments. By the way, I have a whole, if you want to read this whole vlog and blog, get on my Substack, right? You can look up my name on Substack. It's called the Make Sense Substack. I wrote a whole article recently on unveiling of reality and things like that. But from birth, individuals are molded by their environments, parents, educators, religious leaders, societal norms, and evolutionary predispositions. N'est-ce pas? Correct? These elements act as filters influencing how we interpret sensory information. So for instance, cultural backgrounds can affect, this is really interesting, cultural backgrounds can actually affect color perception. What that means is certain people will look at the color red and just say, hey, that's the color red. But other people will look at the color red and have a different perceptual experience, meaning it'll make them think of something else. So just remember, behind all of this stuff, mother, father, teacher, preacher, and in society, there's cultural preferences. So this subjectivity underscores that our grasp, here it is, grab this. It underscores that our grasp, you and I, and we're no different. I'm just aware of it. Our grasp of reality is not purely objective, but it is interwoven, entangled with personal and collective conditioning. Let me say that again. It underscores that our grasp of reality is not purely objective, but it is interwoven and entangled by personal and collective conditioning, as well as a mix of things that we can sense with our five senses, but then there's this whole world of things that we can't sense. Like we can be aware of consciousness, but where does it come from? Right? So we have what we call sensory limitations. This is something that most people don't think of too much. When I say sensory limitations, if you look at your five senses, and we'll call that collectively your sense-making machine, saying that we have sensory limitations means that we can only sense certain things, certain smells from a certain distance, certain sounds. I know that a lot of you have, played with this idea in the doctor's office to see what high pitch you stop, hearing and stuff like that. And other species have different enhancements or decreases in sensory, but we all have sensory limitations. We don't think about that. We assume that our five senses can detect anything, but our sensory organs are remarkable, yet limited in their scope, of practice. So the human eye, for instance, only detects a narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum, leaving us blind to things like ultraviolet and infrared light. Right? You know it's there, I guess, but you can't see it, you can't detect it. Similarly, our ears perceive a specific range of sound frequencies, excluding ultrasonic and infrasonic waves. So here we are. Science has proved that we have these things called ultrasonic and infrasonic waves, but your ears, your sense-making machine cannot detect them. This is where your potential lies. These biological constraints mean that a vast amount or vast portions of reality, this thing that you call reality, you're only referring to the things that live in the actual state that you can sense. But what I'm saying is it means that a lot of what this thing called reality has and possesses exists beyond our direct sensory experience. So research in psychophysics explores these boundaries. So there's actually research in this. I'm not the only one thinking about this. And it reveals how our senses can be both acute and deficient, hypersensitive, but also deficient. So you can have hypersensitive senses, but you can also have deficient senses. For example, while we can detect minute differences in light intensity, we might overlook and not take note of a gradual change in our environment, a phenomenon known as change blindness. Do you know what change blindness is? Look it up. So that's basically like when we're moving from light to dark. You know, I get to see that in the morning when I go out for a run in the dark and then it turns light. I actually look for it, but there's seasonal changes and all these things going on that we don't detect. Such studies highlight the selective nature of perception. Remember, we're talking about limitations, where certain stimuli are amplified, but to the point, others are very much diminished and ignored. So this is something that you can write down that I think is super fascinating. It's called trans-empirical reality. And this is just a fancy word for the elements of reality that we have no idea about because we can't detect them. So the concept of trans-empirical reality refers to aspects of existence, of reality, that transcend empirical observation. The word empirical refers to our ability to observe things as actually there. So what I'm saying is that there are realms that exist that science has identified, and somebody like me that's done plant medicine, I can tell you that they exist. But what we're seeing is that we cannot detect these things, meaning they're transcendent of empirical observation. So these are realms that our senses and scientific instruments cannot even detect. So there's a lot of undiscovered stuff. So this starts to make you realize that a lot of the stuff that we say is just a limited perception. There's a lot more. There's a lot more. So philosophers and scientists debate the nature of such realities, pondering whether they can be known or if they remain forever being unknown, beyond human comprehension. I heard a doctor the other day say something like we're racking our brains trying to figure out like what consciousness is, where it lives and all of that stuff. And I heard somebody say consciousness is something that we just can't comprehend. It's not that he's giving up. He's just saying with our current level of science and our sense-making machines, we cannot detect where it comes from. And that's okay, because there's a lot of stuff that we're unaware of. So this idea challenges the assumption that all aspects of reality are accessible through sensory experience or empirical investigation. So in a nutshell, what that's saying is we have this idea as humans that if we can't see it, feel it, smell it, hear it, sense it, it doesn't exist. Think about that for a second, because whatever you think your potential is right now, you're limiting it to the actual realm of what you can pick up with your sense-making machine. So what's cool about it there's an easy way to kind of like discern the difference between these different dimensions, like the dimension of what we can sense and the dimension we can't. So the two words are actuality and potentiality. So this begins, this idea of like separating the difference. So actuality, what you are currently calling reality, this is the dimension that you and I can observe with our software and our hardware. Okay. Everything that you can say, yep, I see it, I feel it, I smell it. Potentiality, remember we're talking about infinite potential. Potentiality, this is the realm that exists outside of the reach of perception. It doesn't make sense, meaning you don't have the ability to sense it. Now, I always talk about make sense. This is what makes sense really means, is that it's within the realm of your senses. So the space of potentiality transcends human perception. You can't perceive it. Therefore, this space doesn't help us render what we call reality, does it? It does. All you have to do is be aware of it. However, just allowing ourselves to acknowledge the existence of this potential realm, just the idea of saying maybe, if you can say the word maybe about this potentiality realm, your perception of reality moves from rigid to agile. Think about what that means for you. To move from rigid, having made up your mind about everything, to agile and saying things like, not sure, maybe, could be, I'm open to it. So meaning everything that we observe is acknowledged as a best guess, that we have used our tools and made these guesses with. Yet now, if you're entertaining this, we know that there's much more. So the brain's role, let's look at your human brain, that wet piece of meat in constructing reality. Neuroscience reveals that our brains play an active role in shaping perception. Rather than passively receiving data, the brain interprets sensory inputs, often filling in the gaps. So when you look at your potential or this thing you call reality, your brain fills in the gaps and constructs experience based on prior knowledge and experiences, not based on what it can see, because it can't see a lot of things. So your brain produces this image, this movie, based on the way it's been programmed, not based on what it sees, because a lot of it is unseen. So this process can lead to subjective perceptual illusions, right? If I'm losing you right now, it's only because you're not open to infinite potential. And that's okay. That's most people. So perceptual illusions, where what we see does not correspond to physical reality. For example, optical illusions exploit the brain's predictive behaviors. Our brains have predictive behaviors, meaning we predict what we're going to see, causing us to perceive motion or color where none exists. And I know you've experienced weird things like that. Do you know that if you close your eyes, you can still see? Your eyes never stop seeing. They're just behind your eyelids. Close your eyes for long enough and you will start to see things. When my meditation course comes out, I'm going to teach you how to do that. So these phenomena demonstrate that perception is not a mere reflection of the external world, but a constructed experience influenced by our brain's wiring and neural processes. So the reason why I'm sharing that with you, I'm going to move to my reflection and my close. Still stuck on trans-empirical reality. Just look it up, first of all. But what it means is that empirical reality would mean your ability to observe reality. But the word transcendent means that it misses us. It gets by us. It's in a blind spot. We cannot detect it. So trans-empirical reality is referring to this idea that there are certain things, actually more than not, aspects of reality that transcend our empirical observation, meaning our ability to see things. They live in that space of potentiality versus actuality. So the reason why I'm sharing this, and I went through all that science right there, is because if you don't acknowledge it on that level, you'll just think that somebody made it up and your regularly scheduled program will take over. But if you entertain the fact that We don't know everything. In fact, what we know is extremely limited and persuaded by everything that we've learned up until this date, from our experience, from evolution, from what we consume every day. We're being brainwashed, and also what we were taught since birth. That's how you're constructing reality within this realm of what you call actuality. There's way, way more. And you'll never see it, but you just know it. So in reflection, it's my current perception, right? And this is, or perspective, it's my current perspective. And that means that I'm open to change. I'd love to hear your opinion on this. I go on Quora and put this stuff there, and people come up with really cool alternative ideas. I'm open to it. I'm more of a scientist than a know-it-all, right? I want to find out what's new and exciting. I don't need to know everything, but it's my current perspective based on my own observation and all the research that I've done. I put a lot of work into this, into the realm of actuality versus potentiality, that the human sense-making machine has many limitations. I'm certain of that at this time, unless I can be convinced otherwise. Meaning only a fraction of reality can be actually detected and perceived with our five senses. In fact, science is revealing that reality consists in larger part by the undetectable. Let's call that the realm of potentiality, and the other is actuality, like I said before. Actuality being that which we can detect with our senses, potentiality that which we can't. So human perception, what you are currently using now, does offer a window into reality. And it does. It's pretty miraculous what we can do. We talk about this from a place of gratitude, but it's a window framed by the subjective biological limitations of the programming that you've received from your mother, your father, your teacher, your preacher, society, culture, and evolution. By acknowledging that, just by acknowledging that, I teach the interface response system in our Make Sense Academy. In the first phase is just acknowledge. It's called brain awareness perception. Just acknowledge how your brain works and how it's been sculpted. By acknowledging these constraints and limitations, we can decide if we want to take the red pill or the blue pill. Red pill would be explore possibilities because you don't really know. Or you could take the blue pill and just simply continue the assumption that what we see is what we get. But remember, the red pill, you take that red pill, you're going to allow yourself to seek out a more comprehensive understanding of the world. And if your belief system says that you don't have infinite potential right now, that's what you'll need to do. You'll need to embrace a more comprehensive understanding of things in the world and recognize that much, much, much lies beyond the immediate grasp of our baseline perception. What that means is if you're having a rough time right now, you might not be. You might not be. So what we see is indeed what we get, however, not necessarily what actually is. Great reference, Dr. Bruce Perry wrote a book with Oprah Winfrey. He describes it at our ability to become conscious of our brain's unconscious and programmed nature. As I said before, it's called brain awareness perception. Embracing this brain awareness perception encourages continuous open curiosity. That's the way I think we are best served to live, with continuous open curiosity to perspectives and vantage points that challenge our conventional views. If you are locked in and tethered to religion and politics and opinions, and you use cognitive bias and you won't let anything else come in, that's the blue pill, right? You've made up your mind based on what you've learned and what you can see. But if you can recognize with me right now that you don't know too much, you only know what you know, then you're going to be able to explore a lot more. That's where infinite potential lives. So in closing, at this time, my favorite 3 words, because that means that I'm open to change. I don't need to know everything yet. That's why I say, haven't made up my mind. It's my perception at this time that most of what we refer to as reality is undetectable. Meaning when I look at reality and I say, this is reality, I now know and entertain at this time that most of what I'm seeing, I can't detect with my current level of human senses and science. So this makes that, what this does is this helps us see that our perception of actuality, right? Our perception of reality is most likely far from accurate. And what I love about that most, this idea of recognizing that most of what I see includes what I can't see, meaning I cannot equate reality with all that stuff that I can't see. What I love about that most is that it means that reality, for the most part, is not complete, right? Is for the most part not complete. It's incomplete. And it perhaps will never be complete because of all the undetected potentiality. Undetected. So that means there's more undetected potentiality and potential than detected. You have more potential than you know you have. Okay? And this means that we can all smile today. When are we doing this? December 9th, 2024. We're going to be in 2025 soon. This means that on December 9th, 2024, you, me, anybody that's open and curious and willing to explore beyond the made up mind, it means that we can all smile knowing that we have unlimited potential. Make sense? Love and appreciate you. If you like this idea of not being limited and having some more fun and recognizing that we're pretty much all robotically following along with the herd that's been laid out before us, come check out the Make Sense Academy, where we have just open discussions, non-judgmental, not problem-focused, solution-focused, open and curious. And then we provide people the tools from that standpoint. We always say who you are determines how well what you do works. So we work a lot on the who, and then the do becomes more effective. And remember, if you change the way you look at things, the things that you look at begin to change. That's why I wear glasses with no lenses, because I don't need them anymore, because I've decided that I'm in control of my reality. Make sense? Love and appreciate you. Have an amazing day. I'm going on my morning date, or my date morning. Bye-bye now. Have a great day.